I just would love to introduce Geng Wang, the CEO and co-founder at Civic Champs. So previously, Geng was actually a former McKinsey and Company consultant. Fun fact. Also, fun fact, a graduate of Michigan State University and Harvard Business School. Any MSU or Harvard School folks in the house?
Go green.
Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. Show him some love. And then also at Civic Champs, Gong and his team actually deliver a really intuitive and impactful volunteer management software. I'm not sure if you're like, oh, if you all work with him or not, but it's really actually exciting work. And yeah, I guess what I saw, Gung, is that some of your causes of choice are education and economic equality and mobility. So just a little bit about Gung, and I'm going to stop sharing and give it to him to take away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna, for the introduction. It's great to sort of meet everyone here. I'm excited to be here today. I'm going to bring up my screen here shortly. But yeah, super excited to share some of the insights that we have today. This is our sort of the latest and greatest data that we have, and so this is the first time we get to share this with folks. So I'm excited for that. But let me bring up my screen and we can get going. So, hi Arnold, it's good to see you. And so, yeah, screen one. All right, here we go. Hopefully folks can see my screen, maybe put in chat if you're able to do that, and I can make sure that you all can see it. Yes, awesome, excellent. All right, so today's topic is reversing decline in individual giving rates and building your new pipeline with volunteers. And so, one of the, about me, of course, Jenna already gave a little bit of introduction, and so I'll sort of skip that. I think the only other part that for me that might be interesting, right, is I had a couple other prior startups, and so this is my third one, but super excited to be in the nonprofit space this time around. You all are actually what makes it much more fun and interesting. I tell this to everyone I meet when they ask, how is this different from some of your other ventures? And I would say, the nonprofit sector is fundamentally much nicer. The people are much kinder and much just more interesting to engage with. And I think that extends to even the team that we have at Civic Champ. So it's been a real pleasure to be in this sector. And then so we have a couple poll questions that I wanted to bring up. And this is just to get to know folks a little bit. I don't know, Jenna, if you can launch a poll. Awesome, thank you. And so, yeah, this is just a way for me to get a sense of who all is here, but also for you all to get a sense of who is here as well. So we'll let folks sort of fill out the poll here and give you all maybe 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll share the results and take a look. So yeah, super interesting to see if folks have had more or less volunteers in the past year, and sort of what your trends in terms of donors looks like as well. Yeah. And then we'll, of course, share our data set internally, but also the information that we've gleaned from other surveys and reports that have been published. Maybe, I don't know, Jenna, if we've crossed the, let's call it 70% mark. So we can close and maybe share with everybody, if that works.
Does everyone see the results?
Yes. Oh, I think, oh, shoot. Yeah, we did short answers this time. So that will make it harder to get a sense of the ranges.
If you want,
Well,
I can
yeah.
also share. I can also pull them out and share my screen while we review them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Let's see if I can. Yeah, sorry, I actually haven't really used many of the
polls. It's kind of
test,
a
but I
fun
think we
tool
should be
for
able to
a
do this one.
little bit
So if
more
you stop,
engagement.
If you stop sharing your screen, I can probably reshare mine. And
Okay.
it'll include the participants' email if that's okay with everyone. I don't know.
Let's see what we have here. All right, great. Yeah, so we have a good range, it looks like, from 300, 50, 15, 500, 15, give or take. I like that. Yeah, so anywhere from sort of the low, you know, single digits to up to maybe 500 or plus. And then it is lower for folks in terms of volunteering, grown. Yes, doubled, it hasn't, not much. And then let's see if there's grown back to pre-COVID. I would say just glancing through, it looks like maybe that was like half and half perhaps. And then the number of donors decreased, no, shrunk by 15, increase, no, we've seen an increase. Yes, but increase since COVID. And so here maybe a little bit of a mix with a few more increase than decreases potentially, which is great. It could be that there's some bias here for folks that are on the call, right, doing a better job. So,
It's really cool. Okay.
great,
This was
thank you.
fun. Thanks for participating, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me share my screen again and we'll dive into what the industry says. And so here, again, so here's what we find, right? So we're going to talk about the trends in terms of individual giving and volunteering. Then we're going to talk about the connection between donors and volunteers. And then once we do that, we'll talk about how you might engage your different constituents, and then a little bit about technology that might help since we are a technology company. Right? And so, so I think the bad news, of course, and some of you may have seen these reports already, right, is in 2023, in terms of giving, donors decreased by about 3.4% overall, year over year. And then in terms of dollars, that was also lower, roughly another 3% drop in terms of dollars. And then retention also decreased, right? And this is from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. Right? I think this is, David, to your question, this is US centric from my understanding. And sorry, most of the presentation is fairly US centric, I think. And so apologize not having as much data about sort of global trends. And then the decline here was, I think, unfortunately, also across all donor sizes. So whether that's micro, small, mid-size, major, or super size, right? If you look across the board, the year-over-year change was across all sizes, right? Not just a particular size. And unfortunately, also across all donation frequencies, right? And I think even perhaps more concerning, right, is that the drop was even larger on the recurring donations, right? So people that donated or had multiple donations in a year, right? So you saw drop for just one-time donations, but also folks that had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus donations, right? Typically. And this, unfortunately, is a continuation of trend since 2021. So you can see here year-over-year trends of going down by 6%, 10%, and this year a little better, but still going down at I think they adjusted this 4.9 to 3.4% there. Right? And even worse, right, just like continuing the hammer on the point here, a reflection, at least in the US, of really long-term trends since 2000. So if you look at household giving percentages, overall giving, right, starting at 66.2%, really dropping down in 2014 to 55%, right, and now we're sort of continuing that decline as well, right? So religious giving going down, secular giving also going down as well. But on the flip side, right, this is from our data at Civic Champs, we actually saw increases in volunteerism. And so whether that's the active number of volunteers per organization going up by about 1%, to the number of hours that people have contributed, increasing about 6%, to the monetary impact, all the way to the number of activities that, or the number of instances of volunteering that an organization sees across a year, really increasing 8% actually in 2023. And this isn't just from our data, but really if you look at other data sets, right? And so this is a Google search. And if you search for volunteering opportunities near me, what you would see is that you actually have this nice increase in interest in volunteerism over time from 2019 all the way here to 2024. And so even during COVID, you see this big dip, right? You know, people stop searching. And then pre-COVID, right, July of 2019, we're sort of in the 50s here. But here, actually, the peaks are at 100, which is double of what we had right before COVID hit, right? So that's really exciting, is that people are looking to be involved in terms of volunteerism. And that's also reflected by our friends at Volunteer Match. This is their data. And so 2023 actually had the most number of matches that they've ever made, or connections. So they had 735,000 matches that they had on their platform last year, which is a 23% increase year over year for them. And then finally, a report by Toby Johnson, she does this survey every year, is you can see, these are different buckets of the active, the sort of a range of the active number of volunteers that nonprofits are self-reporting, right? And so as an example, in fall of 2020, about 30% of nonprofits reported that they had between 1 to 25 volunteers. And so that's kind of what that looks like. And then you can see here, right? So in fall 21, 22, 23, and now that's only 8% of the sort of 1 to 25. And you can see on the far right, the buckets of 750 plus volunteers really increasing. So just looking at the different shades and colors, you can really see the trends over time, where really the larger buckets of volunteers has really grown, right? And that's great. I see Arnold and Jenny have also noticed things, very as well, right? And then the average hours per volunteer has likewise grown. So this is from the same report. And so looking at fall 21 through 23, you can see that, again, you just look at that shift in the color bands. It's probably the easiest, right? On the low end, right, 0 to 10 hours, right, 10 to 20 hours, right? Those are actually shrinking. And then on the right, you can see the number of hours that people are putting in on the high end really growing, right? And so super exciting to see that as well. And then when we did a similar poll or survey, this is the results from last time we asked the question of, hey, did you have more or less volunteers versus last year? About 55% of people said they had more volunteers today than they had before, and only 16% said they had fewer. Right? And absolutely, I think Marie Jose, right? Like your point is spot on, which is corporates are now much more active than they used to be, and so you're going to see more activities on the corporate volunteering side too. And so why does that matter, right? So we're making this distinction that, hey, giving has been dropping, continues to decrease, but on the flip side, right, volunteerism is on a very different trajectory going up. And the matters is because 87% of donors support their causes both with time and money, right? So there's an 87% overlap here, where 4% of folks actually, they will volunteer at every place they donate to. 39%, based on Fidelity Charitable, say that they have significant overlap in terms of where they've donated and where they volunteer. And then there's some overlap, but there's some amount of volunteering that's happening here, right? And so the other piece is, if we look at another report by the Do Good Institute that just got published in January of this year, they talk about how when you volunteer, you're actually much more likely, 14.5% more likely to give the next year, right? And also people that give in the previous year are more likely to volunteer in the current year by 9.3%. So there's like a very strong sort of cyclical, reinforcing cycle for people that give and volunteer, right? And so really you want to encourage and this is not any organizations doing anything differently, right? But just like, as we're sort of operating today, this is the statistics that you see, right? So you can imagine if you're actually more purposeful about this and guiding your volunteers, right, in terms of or encouraging them to donate, right, those percentages could be much, much higher. And then, of course, and Fidelity, own report again says that people, 50% of volunteers say that volunteer has also led to them giving more to an organization, right? So the last statistics that we saw is, they're more likely to give, but now they're actually giving more dollars as well, right? So it's kind of a double whammy that you get. And this isn't, this shouldn't be super surprising, right? Because when you look at why people volunteer, right? These are the top, let's call it 5 reasons that people volunteer. And the top 2 really are around making a difference in my community or contributing to a cause I care about. So it's really around this emotional connection to the cause, to the community, or to others, right? And then that's very similar to why people give in terms of financial gifts, right? Is they also want to feel this connection, right? So if you look at sort of especially these bottom 3 right here, right? They feel like they're part of an important cause. They feel their involvement is appreciated, right? They receive information showing who is being helped, right? So they understand that they're, what impact they're having, and they have this sort of emotional connection to the cause, right? And so so there's this really strong overlap in terms of both the contributions, why people volunteer and why they donate, and thus of course if they volunteer they donate more, and they're donating more often as well, right? So how can we take advantage of that? But also, if you one of the things that I know a lot of organizations are trying to do is they're trying to recruit more younger donors, right? They say, hey, we have a lot of donors, they're recurring donors, but they're sort of aging out of our donor pool. And one of the things that, from this Fidelity report, that it shows that millennials and Gen X, right, are actually more motivated in terms of volunteerism than their than older cohorts, right? And so what this shows is that 33% of millennials gave more after volunteering, 21% of Gen X, et cetera, et cetera. And so volunteerism has an even greater impact for your younger cohorts, right? So as you're looking to recruit more younger donors, volunteerism is also great at doing that. And finally, this chart's a little harder to read. It's very technical, so I won't go into it as much. But basically, from Giving Pulse this year, they came out with a report that shows that when times are tough, right, when people stop donating money and your overall donation levels decrease, the cohort of volunteers are the most resilient. They're the ones that still continue to donate financially to your organization when everyone else stops, right? And that's kind of this little peak right here. They have this what they call the Jacquard score, but what that shows is that as the sort of the percentage of folks that only give money, right? You could see this bottom wave as that goes down, right? The percentage of the donors that are from volunteers actually remains relatively stable, and overall, as a percentage basis, grows in those instances. Right? And so, as a little bit of a recap here, right, which is why should you activate volunteers as donors? Well, the first thing, right, is that the data shows that volunteers or donors are not distinct different groups, right? Most volunteers are donors and vice versa. And you can see that 76 to 79% of volunteers will donate. And then 68 to 79% of donors will volunteer with the organizations they donate with, right? And so they're sort of one and the same in many ways. And then also the act of doing one encourages the act of the other, right? So as you think about even on donor retention, one of the ways that you can really drive donor retention actually will be to get your existing donors to volunteer with you, right? Because if they're more, if you can get them to volunteer, they're more likely to continue giving as well. And then last but not least, right, as you're looking at your younger cohort of volunteers and donors, volunteering has a greater impact in terms of encouraging donations from your millennials. I imagine that's true also for Gen Z, although the report didn't say that. And then also, volunteers are your stickiest donors. They're the ones that truly stick with you, which is not surprising, right? Because they have a stronger connection to your cause. Right? And by the way, if folks have any questions, please feel free to continue posting. I see Jenny also made the point here that oftentimes people don't donate because we don't make the ask, which I think is absolutely true, right? And so you have to make the ask, of course, right, to encourage the behavior. And so what are some opportunities for folks, knowing this and you believe in this data, how can you engage people differently, maybe encourage some of your volunteers to actually take that next step in terms of becoming a donor as well, right? So step one, of course, per Jenny, is to make the ask. But in addition to that, right, there's a couple, things to keep in mind, right? So the first part is that, while people think about, the mission, that's the number one thing, right, in terms of where they want to volunteer, right? As you're trying to grow your volunteer core to drive more potential donors, you have to also keep in mind some of these other elements that really impact whether people decide to volunteer with you or somewhere else, right? And so some of those things can be they enjoying, people like the tasks that they do, right? It fits into their schedule. And so those are, next to the mission are the other two most important things that people consider, right? And so in that case, right, think about your volunteer program. Do you have interesting tasks that are matched to the skills or the wishes of your volunteers? And second, are you able to create flexibility in terms of how people can volunteer with you, right? Or do you have kind of this regimented model that makes it actually hard for people to fit into their schedule, right? The second thing to think about is, this is also from Volunteer Match, is that people really want to leverage their people skills, right? So when they're volunteering, caring and people skills is the thing that that 77% of the respondents here said they want to use when they're volunteering. And so thinking about the types of volunteering that you have in your organization, are people actually able to leverage those skills? Do they have the ability to maybe connect with other people? Are they able to help someone, right? Sort of person to person, if you will, right? And so those are some of the considerations that you might want to think about as you're looking to grow your volunteer core. And then related to sort of the first point around flexibility and schedule, one of the things that has stuck with us since COVID is people are just much more aware of this ability to help their neighbors more directly because of COVID, right? So neighbors helping neighbors, mutual aid groups really popped up. And that's actually continued even after COVID. People got a taste of it, they liked it, and so they want to continue doing something similar to it. And so even if we're an organized volunteering program as part of a nonprofit, right, could we provide opportunities that have more of that direct element, right? That people are looking for, right? In terms of feeling like you're directly helping your neighbors. And then a couple, thoughts in terms of how you might, let's say activate your volunteers as donors. So let's say you're doing all of these activities, right? And you're growing your program, you're trying out different schedules, and then now you're at the point of making the ask. Well, how might you actually do that ask correctly without alienating certain folks? What are some ideas that you can leverage, right? And so one idea that you can think about is, a lot of us are familiar with giving pledges, right? So we pledge, whether that's university or elsewhere, we say, hey, United Way will send me a postcard that says, hey, will you pledge to give this year to United Way, 25, 50, $100, whatever the amount is. You can actually use that very similar concept with volunteerism, right? So asking people to do a volunteering pledge. And this could be really great because a lot of folks are looking for recurring volunteers, and those are the volunteers that everyone likes more of, right? Because once you train them once, they're going to come back again and again. You don't have to retrain folks as much, and they're going to provide more and more value because as they get more familiar with the organization, they're going to be more comfortable and able to do more and more for you. And so doing a pledge can encourage them to continue to come back in some way, right? I think the other thing, of course, right, with the pledge is it also, on a financial giving side, gives you an opportunity down the road potentially to make an ask, right? And to say, hey, Geng, we really would love to have you back. Here are, 5 opportunities next month for you to volunteer with us again. But if you can't make it, we also understand, would you mind consider a sort of financial contribution so that we can continue to further the mission that we have here at XYZ nonprofit, right? And this way you can also highlight the value of their volunteering time and hours, right? So like you could say, hey, 8 hours of volunteering or a shift or 4 hours of volunteering, if we were to hire somebody, this would cost X. Right. And so, in lieu of coming in to volunteer, would you consider making a $120 contribution? Right. And so this is also a way to increase the amount that perhaps you would be comfortable in making that, that ask. Right. Yes, Jenna. Yeah, absolutely. If you have questions or feedback for me, yes, please post in chat here. The other thing, someone mentioned earlier is there's a lot of companies that are really ramping up their volunteering programs. And so many of these companies have matching gift programs. Originally, the matching gifts are for financial gifts. So if you donate $10, they'll match $10 as well for that donation. But a lot of companies also have volunteering matching. And so there's 2 ways they do this. One is for an individual, if you volunteer, let's say 10 hours, they'll say give a financial contribution of $10 per hour. So 10 hours is 100, would equal $100 in that case, right? $10 per hour times 10 hours is $100. And so, the volunteer would submit a form back to their company and a check would be made to the nonprofit organization, right? And I see there's the list of the company. So Starbucks would be a good example. Now, Exxon I know has one. So really, I think the statistic, if I remember from one of the other presentations we do, was something like 75% or something like that of the Fortune 500 have some form of volunteer match information. Double the donation is a good resource if you want to take a look at the list of folks, right? And so, yeah, I can sort of, I'll put that in the chat here, double the donation. They're a good resource here to understand, who does what kind of matching. The other form of matching that companies will do is they'll say, they'll have some sort of threshold, right? And basically, if you hit, 40 hours, 20 hours with an organization, then they'll cut maybe just, a flat check for $500 to that organization. And so that's a really interesting way to both, leverage encourage more corporate volunteerism, but also get some financial contributions from those corporate volunteers without them actually having to donate themselves, right? It could also be very motivating for a volunteer if they've, let's say they've done 8 hours with you already, but there's a cutoff of 20 hours that the company requires before they'll do a financial match. Then you could say, hey, if you volunteer another 12 hours, that unlocks a $500 donation from your company to us, right? And that could be really motivating for that volunteer. And then of course there's non-corporate matching, right? So there's sometimes there's matching donations by a foundation or another donor. That could be interesting, and we'll actually dive into a flavor of that here in a little bit too. Okay. And so in terms of matching, campaigns outside of corporations, one concept that I've seen work is you can have just a larger donor, create a matching fund, right? And say, $10,000, $5,000, whatever it is, and have that match be exclusive to volunteers, right? And say, if you volunteer with us, we have Bill or, whoever the donor is, it could even be a company, is willing to match $20 if for all our volunteers who donate today, and there's sort of there's a 72-hour window for this to happen, right? It sort of unlocks this match because of their volunteering activity. And so I've seen this, I think there's a company out of Minnesota called Kindly. They've sort of co-created this with Feed My Starving Children, and had really good success. So something to think about, and maybe reach out to Feed My Starving Children if folks know of someone there, to see and hear about their experience, right? And then last but not least here, in terms of ideas on how you can activate your volunteers as matches, is you can do a more traditional email campaign or solicitation here, right? And so this is a bit of a template that you can use, right? And it just has 3 parts here, just to make it easier for folks, right? The first part is to thank people for their gift of time and highlighting their personal contribution. And so in this example, it says, hi, Sarah, above all else, we thank you for your 5 hours of support you provided at the Knock Lupus Out of the Park baseball tournament. Having you greet and register all the teams made it possible for us to raise $1,200, $1,250 for the lupus research project, right? And then in the middle, right, so the next paragraph is you would say, what else is still needed, right? And so in this example, it's, the more data we collect, the more we learn about lupus to find a cure and make management more accessible to survivors. As the number of lupus patients grow in both women and men, we find ourselves needing more equipment to process samples faster and more accurately. Our fundraising goal of $150,000 will help cover the cost for a light sensing device that gives us more information about lupus flares. So just like, hey, this is awesome, we did this, here's what's still needed. And then you end with the ask, right? And so you can explain why donating and volunteering are helpful, and try to avoid sending the message that they should choose one or the other, right? And so volunteers like you are our most influential advocates for lupus research, as you saw at the baseball tournament. It's because you give your time that we're able to spread the message and reach others willing to donate to the cause. We're still about $50,000 away from reaching our goal, and we need your help to turn third base and head to home plate. Right? And so kind of a nice template for folks to use if you want to do a more traditional campaign as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Right. All right. And then finally, right, in terms of technology that can help, I won't be too self-serving here. Obviously, if you're interested in learning about Civic Champs and how you might, how we can sort of activate your volunteers as donors, happy to do a demo. We'll sort of put the link here. Thank you, Jenna, to do that, and we can share a bit more. The way we think about it, though, is for Civic Champs, there's kind of a natural volunteer life cycle, right? From recruiting to onboarding to scheduling to engagement to retention reporting. And of course, our platform, wants to be there for every step of that way. But what you want to do is make sure if you believe in the trends in this information and you want to leverage volunteerism as a way to really drive an increase in your individual giving pipeline, right? Each step is really important to make sure you do right. So from a recruitment standpoint, right, you want to make sure that you're very clear on expectations with your volunteers, right? What is it that's expected of them, so that when they come, expectations are not misaligned and they have a good experience, right? And similarly, we talked about earlier, right, creating flexibility in the types of volunteerism that you can get, again, sort of broadening potential pool or the funnel of potential volunteers, so that you can get more volunteers who can then be, more potential donors, of course, right? And then, of course, on onboarding or scheduling standpoint, you want to have something that's seamless and easy, right? Not overbearing and difficult to use. I think the easiest win here is just to be very responsive to the degree that you can be, right? It's, lots of studies show that if you can get back to folks, within the minute, within the day, within the hour, like each one of the shortening of the duration before you get back to somebody makes a huge difference in terms of whether they convert or not, right? So in this case, converting into a volunteer, right? That timeliness really matters. People are busy, right? If you think about yourself individually, if someone doesn't get back to you, right, you move on with your life. Maybe you choose something else to do, right? And then from an engagement and retention standpoint, I think one of the key things here is really collecting feedback and understanding how your volunteers are able, if did they have a good experience or not, and how can you improve your program, right? This does two things for you. One, you get the feedback, so and you can reach out to people that are not as happy, maybe call them, make sure that they're feeling okay and they don't spread the news to other folks necessarily. For your happy volunteers, right, you're able to thank them, maybe encourage them to come back. But on the donation side too, right, this allows you to avoid soliciting anyone that was unhappy already, right? That just kind of further aggravates somebody potentially. And then on the flip side, you can identify people that had a great time, maybe that are really passionate and in that moment feeling like they're really inspired by your mission, right? And so you can capture that energy, and if you're able to ask them for a donation in that moment, that can be really powerful, right? And so those are just some of the things, of course, to think about. And then from a reporting standpoint, if you have a solution where you can actually see volunteerism and financial gifts sort of on one platform within your CRM, that's obviously a plus, because then you could pull reports that say, hey, show me everyone that has volunteered for 20 hours or more this year, but hasn't donated, right? That you could run a very specific campaign for them. Or for the example that we gave earlier, right? Show me everyone that volunteered at the lupus, baseball tournament event that hasn't donated yet, right? And you would, craft a message to them. For those that did donate already, maybe, either you skip it or you send some other message that's a little bit more tailored to them, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Again, if folks want to reach out and connect, happy to do so, right? And that's really it in terms of, so wrapping up, this is just my personal contact information. I'd love to stay in touch. That's my email, our web address, and then also my LinkedIn. And we're also always looking for feedback. I always say, we're collect feedback from your volunteers. And so I'm always looking for feedback. Hopefully this presentation is helpful. But more importantly, what matters is that you got something out of it. And so if you don't mind, we'll put in a little link here for sharing feedback. And if you can just give us your thoughts on how I can get better or things that you really liked, that would be awesome.
Yeah, Geng, I don't know if I ever got that the feedback form.
Yeah, let's see. I don't know if Ariana is on, but you might be something. Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay, great. Perfect. Awesome. This has been wonderful. Yeah, please everyone take advantage of Gung's offers, especially for looking into their solutions and providing feedback. And I mean, we have plenty of time to chat, to go in depth on any one of these aspects of volunteerism and donations. Um, so Gung, I mean, we have scheduled till, 1:50, between 1:50 and 1:55 Eastern. Would you like to go through the Q&A panel?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to answer any questions and have a more casual conversation with folks if that's helpful. I know I went through some of the data up front a little bit quickly, so hopefully I think Jenna, you're recording and sharing some of that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, people will be able to watch it on their own at their own pace
Yeah.
afterwards sometime next week.
My self-reflection is I should have gone a little slower at the beginning.
No, it's great. It's so funny. Like today has been, I mean, it's live. Everything's sort of off the cuff. So that's what happens with live events, right?
Right.
So we're just happy to all be here.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for the very kind words in the chat. I see them. Always grateful to get words of affirmation. So
Yeah, so it looks like I mean, I guess if we just start with Arnold, do you know any insight on what had caused the decline in individual giving? Do you have background on that?
yeah, I forgot there's a separate Q&A. I was just looking at the chat.
Oh
That's
yeah, we
great.
can go through both. Yeah.
Now I can see it. Okay, yeah, no, Arnold, great question. I think this is a widely debated topic, right, in terms of what's causing the decline in individual giving. It's a very, as you saw from the graph, like a very long cycled trend, if you will, right? And we see some blips over time, in terms of COVID kind of encouraging people to give again. A lot of the dollars has been offset by the large donations, right? Like the billionaires, et cetera, that are giving just more dollars. But the percentage of people giving has really declined. I think since the 1960s. Some of it, I think there's thoughts that it's around civic engagement generically, right? So you'll see that participation in churches and civic groups has also seen a very similar decline over time. And so I'm not sure there's like a good solution. There's lots of folks that have ideas on how to sort of fight this a little bit, if you will. But I don't think there's been a stated cause, that's super obvious. And then what is Volunteer Match by Heather. So Volunteer Match is a good partner of ours. They basically are a matching platform, right? So nonprofits can post opportunities for volunteering on Volunteer Match, and then volunteers would go there and look and sort and find different volunteering opportunities to sign up for. And so it's a way for you to recruit additional volunteers, and they're probably the largest, at least in the U.S. From a national standpoint, platform in terms of both people visiting it and then the number of nonprofits that use it to post, right? I know there's some city-specific sites as well that some cities host themselves that have their own little marketplace. And then David says, what words would work for a pledge of both volunteering donations, or are they separate pledges? Oh, that's super interesting. I have not actually, honestly, I've not thought about, I've always thought about them as separate pledges, but I can definitely see sort of a joint pledge to ask, for a, pledge of donations and or volunteering. I've just never seen that before. My sense is that sometimes choice can be, giving people too many choices isn't necessarily a good thing. And so, I don't know if anyone's tested it, but my guess is that the messaging probably gets a little bit harder to ask for both time and dollars in sort of in the same space, right? I think it's probably easier once somebody has given time to ask for dollars or has already given dollars than to ask for time, right? Because then you can tailor that message to thank them for one or the other and then encourage them to do the next. And then anonymous attendee, additional advice about starting a matching gifts grant program within the fundraising strategy of a small emerging nonprofit. Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you get if you get any sort of larger donation, and it doesn't have to be $10,000, right? It could be if a large donation for your organization is $1,000, use that, right? And what you can do is you can ask that donor if they're okay with making their donation a match instead, right? I think from a accounting standpoint, technically that those dollars you don't you would then quote unquote take off your books until the matches come in, and you would recognize it after there's matches, right? But you already have the dollars, right? But you can but that would be a way to maybe start a matching gifts or grants program, even if you don't have one already. And sometimes, right, people they may pledge $1,000 but not give it immediately, and then you can always ask them like, hey, for your gift that you're about to give, could we use that as a match to really leverage it to get even more dollars? My guess is no one's going to not no one's a strong word, but most people will probably say, yeah, sure, why not? If my gift can get more, what a great thing to do, right? And so I think that's an easy way to get your matching gift started. What are the best way to connect with corporations who may offer I found some quite well. They don't seem open to much email communication. Yeah, a lot of these folks get a lot of spam email from companies and vendors, right? I would say, phone calls are always good, right? Because there's so few phone calls these days. You might be able to, break through. Visiting in person, because if you're literally there, people, if they see you, they know it's a real person. I think the corporations, Double the Donation is a good resource in terms of identifying which companies have these programs. A lot of your local branches may or may not even be aware. And so there's a little bit of education that you might have to give to them. Be like, hey, I noticed that, Microsoft has this program to do blah, 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 blah. I don't know if our local office here in, Tacoma has thought about coming out as a group, and we'd love to have you. And by the way, this could really help us raise some money as well, blah, 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 right? And so that could be something that people are unaware of, right? And so educating them might be something you'd have to do. And then last but not least, from John, what's the current breakdown by source of donation, such as on-site donations at events, admissions to online, and 3 snail mail, like a check mail after a direct mail campaign? Oh, I see. John, I don't think, I don't have that insight. For us, we're much more focused on the volunteering data and the volunteering trends. On the donation side, I imagine for every nonprofit, this is actually quite different. A lot of folks have actually moved away from mailing campaigns. And not everyone has the big on-site events, and some only have big on-site events. So I think it probably varies, but I don't know what this looks like from a trends perspective generally across time, right? And so that might be something that Jenna and Cosvox would probably have a much better view on compared to us. Not to put you on the spot.
But yeah, we generally see like a trend in online giving, especially with like millennials and Gen Z these days. there are like, I think we did one report in 2023 about giving trends. So that could be a little insightful. It's on our website. But yeah, this has been really great. It's just a lot, like a wealth of information on the crossover between volunteerism and
Yeah.
donations. And yeah, I think like the nice thing is that like in your data, it seems to be an upward trend in that volunteerism. I thought it was interesting, especially among millennials. And I don't know if you guys have insight into like the Gen Z alpha stuff areas yet.
Yeah, so from what we see, it's like it's even more pronounced, right? Actually, for Gen Z, I didn't have, it wasn't on that slide specifically, but in one of our other presentations we do around how to recruit Gen Z, I think the data we've seen has been that people are really looking for purpose, right? Are more attuned, and sort of this trend towards more local, more specific has continued, in part because the rest of your life is very catered to you, right? And as well. And so you're just kind of used to that kind of experience where it's like, oh yeah, I would like to help this very specific cause in this very specific place because that's where I'm at and that's what I really care about, as opposed to, and I think it's hard for organizations like United Way, as I used to be on the board of one, and right, where it's like more general, right? Like you're donating to our community at large, right? And I think the trend is that people are less interested in that and more looking at like, well, what specific impact did I have, right? And having that really transparent, data-driven knowledge of saying like, oh yeah, your dollars went to Jenna, right? If you can't disclose that typically, right? But that's kind of the level that I think people are looking for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's that's interesting to note. And then also Jenny's note about like maybe it's like seasonal or like it depends on like social economic impact around like that will impact people's participation or
Oh,
interest.
sure. I mean, the election for sure is going to have an impact, right? Because people are donating to their party of choice right now, and it's not an infinite pool of dollars, right? That we all have, and so I'm sure that diverts a certain amount from other causes, right, during this
What
time.
about for like the organizations who might have like put, like zero for their volunteer number, or like for just startup nonprofits?
Yeah,
Like how should they go about um, reaching out or activating their first set of volunteers?
I think starting small is just like anything else is totally fine. Um, I always find it super interesting because we say zero, but almost everyone has a board. Your board are volunteers, right? They're not getting paid. Your committees are volunteers, right? And almost every nonprofit starts off as 100% volunteer driven, right? Habitat for Humanity, right, started as just a small group of volunteers, right, that decided, on a farm that they wanted to do certain things. Boys and Girls Club, etc., right? Like everyone has these founding stories, and they all start with 100% volunteers, and that's how nonprofits start, right? And at some point, we professionalize and we hire our first executive director, etc. But if you think about even the history of your own organization, there's lots of ways for people to give, to volunteer, because that is actually the root of your founding story. And so leaning back into that, finding people, similar people again that might have those passions to contribute in whatever way, right? Whether that's in finance, whether that's, and this is where I think that flexibility and the opening up what we consider to be volunteers is helpful, right? Because instead of a very pigeonholed, like our volunteers only do these, they only move boxes from A to B, and that's all I want. From 9 to 5, I just want someone to move boxes from A to B, right? You can open the purview up a little bit and say, well, maybe instead of moving boxes, they can also be a photographer, right, for my big event, and I could save money by not having to hire another professional photographer, right? I can I can leverage these other skills that people might have.
Oh, yes, very smart. See, he's so wise. Thank you, Geng, for just being an expert in this area. And I'm just going to repost. I think this will work. All the ways to connect.
Yes. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
in case we didn't get to answering any of your questions, you can always um, reach out to Geng and his team, and I'm sure they would be happy to assist in this
Absolutely.
area.
Absolutely. I love connect. Like I said, this space is awesome. You all are awesome. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'd like to stay. So, yeah, please do reach
Yay!
out.
Yay, Geng, you are awesome. And your team and Ariana, thank you so much for all of your work to participate with us today and all of your insights.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.